So let me introduce you to my guest. She's Executive Director at Creative Diversity Network and has over 30 years experience of working in media, in the media industry, as well as public policy development across creative and cultural industries. And she's a disabled powerlifter 2018 and 2019. Welcome, Deborah Williams. It's great to have you.
Nice to be invited.
No, Deborah, I'm really interested to talk to you because I think the work you guys are doing at Creative Diversity Network is so important. Now, before we get underway and really delve into a few topics, could you just briefly explain for those who may not be familiar with your organization, why it was set up and what kind of work that you do?
Essentially, we were set up to monitor the demographics of who makes television in the UK and who's on television in the UK. So the main broadcasters are members. It's a membership organisation, a trade body, as well as the production community. So PACT are also a member, and BAFTA, ITN, BBC, Sky, the Channel 4. We are all members, and what we do is we collect data and monitor who's on television, who makes television, and if people see themselves best represented. And we use the data. Data is our foundation. So we use the data to design schemes and initiatives and programs of work for change to ensure that diversity is fully represented and diverse communities are represented, not just on screen, but off screen as well, in everything that gets commissioned.
Yeah, well, that's really important. And also there's I guess there's an accountability when you do this kind of work, and it keeps people under check and under wraps, like, what are you doing to make a difference? So I think that's really amazing what you do. Now, you're really involved in policy development on diversity too. Can you share a little bit about that? How, what changes you guys have made towards inclusion and creating equity for everybody in media, working towards that at least?
I mean, thank you for saying that. I think what's really important, and the most important thing that's happened in the last 5 years that I've been doing this work, is that disability has now become part of the diversity conversation. Before that, it just wasn't there. It was mainly about race and gender, but disability is now front and center. We've focused on it for a couple of years in terms of designing policy from a research base and really being clear that these are things, this is really important. Disabled people are important in the production and the writing and the directing and the creating of work, not just in terms of putting people on screen, and not just in the sports space. So it's not just about Paralympians. It's about trying to tell the diversity of life as the disabled people live, and that's been really important. We're also working incredibly hard to try and look at access to work, so the government policy that supports people into employment, and so supports people when they get a job, who may need additional support to remove barriers that exist and that are pre-existing. So we're doing work around that as well. We've also done a considerable amount of work around race and ethnicity in terms of terminology, what sort of language you're using, and we're encouraging people to change the way that they think about race and ethnicity and heritage and culture, because they're all different things, but they are all interlinked. And sometimes people talk about race when they mean heritage, or talk about culture when they mean ethnicity. So we're trying to make sure that the diversity of voices and the multiplicity within diversity is present, so we don't just move from one monolith to another monolith, and sort of homogenous thinking doesn't take over in the area of diversity.
Now, I think it's all very well getting change in policy, implementing new laws and so on. However, getting those into action, enforcing that, is a different matter. Would that be a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement, yes. So what we try to do, the way we work is, the joy is that the great thing is that we have all of the key players in broadcasting in our membership. And that means that we are able to have open and honest conversations and transparent conversations with them on a regular basis about what is being successful, what is being achieved and what isn't, and ways to change things. So that's what we do. We use our position to leverage conversations and to leverage debate, and to really make sure that, not just holding people to account behind closed doors, but we publish our data on an annual basis. And in between, we also try to look at deep dive into particular areas and elements of our data. So that's also really important and quite critical, that we're not just collecting data and not doing anything with it, but we share it, and that's available online, free, and our methodology is available, and access to a lot of other data is available for other people to use, which has started to happen. So other institutions, organizations, lobbying groups or pressure groups or advocacy organizations are also accessing our data and using it to say, look, this is happening in the UK, or this is happening in the craft space, or this is happening around race and ethnicity, or around disability or sexual orientation and gender. And these are some of the things that we're able to feed into and add better context and better substance to, that are happening continuously.
Well, I think that's great, because then that gives a sort of not a formula, but a methods and data and an analysis for other sectors to use, because this isn't just a media problem, as we know, it's across the board. So I think that's really great. And of course, I shall put a link to your website in the show notes for anybody to go and check out, the work that you've done. Now, talking about the work that you do, you have some projects, a Diamond project and Doubling Disability. Can you share a little bit about those with us and how people can benefit from those?
So Diamond is as I said before, that's the online system that collects the data. Essentially, it's an equal opportunities form that you fill in for everyone that gets that works on a project that gets commissioned by Channel 5, BBC, Channel 4, ITV, Sky, Discovery, UK TV, BSLB TV, everything that gets commissioned by those broadcasters.
Is that a voluntary
if you're
thing?
Involved in a project,
is that voluntary?
So it's voluntary.
Yeah.
So yes, it's voluntary. You get, basically, we collect the email, your email address. It goes into a system. You get an email. You can opt out if you want to opt out. If you want to opt in, you get a form to fill in, and you fill it in once every 2 years, and that data sits in the system. And because of because you filled it in once, we can collect data every other time that you do work for 2 years, so you don't have to fill it in again. And that's, as I said, we publish that data on an annual basis, and we use it to leverage and have conversations with all of our broadcasters and all of our members and production community as well, about what they're doing, and about looking and going, look, what we say, we're trying to make this as representative as we can in terms of population based on the census, but this is too far away, or you're working towards something here, and trying to look at what's working and what's not working, and identifying that. And that's how the disability conversation started. So Doubling Disability is our 2-year project, which was obviously pandemic meant that we had to extend that somewhat, but that was really focusing on, disability representation was so low and so woeful. Population wise in the UK, it is 17%, and we were looking at 4%, 4.5% in the production space, so off screen. So we sought out to double that, to get to 9% in 2 years. We've not hit the target, unfortunately. We only moved by 1%. But what we did do was the wraparound work. So we've got some trainers now who are disabled people who are training, who have just completed becoming trainers, that we've designed a training course. And they are now trainers who go out into the industry and be able to train around how you support and work with disabled people and think about the social model of disability. We have also been working with broadcasters and underlying health condition, and the work that Jack Thorne and Genevieve Barr have been doing. So to really look at, facilities and access coordinators and those sorts of conversations in high-end television, what support might be needed there. We are also partnering and working with a research community in the University of Glasgow, Professor Doris Eickhoff, who works there, and we're working with them on a project called Everyday Diversity. So that is really about taking all of the research and going, these are the building an app so people can access good practice, talk to, find out what other people are doing when they are thinking about recruiting, or when they are thinking about hiring people or commissioning people or working with writers or bringing in sound and costume and makeup, all of the areas of television and production, we are working with. There'll be an app available for people from the summer this year, so July 2022.
And is there a name for the app? Have you got that yet? Or
yes, it's called Everyday Diversity. It's called Everyday Diversity.
Excellent.
And that app will be available from the summer, and that will be able, people can access that and, you know, learn from them, their industry, learn from their peers as to what's working, what's not working, how people have resolved things, and, you know, problems that have arisen or issues that they thought, oh, I don't know how to resolve this. That'll be a space for people to be able to access there and really get support and information. So that's basically how we do it. You know, we use the research and we use the data to find real world practical problems that can be implemented across media and broadcasting to solve problems, but also to raise awareness and make sure that people fully understand that diversity is not a nice to have thing over there for other people. Diversity is really critical and quite core to the industry's maintaining its position as a global pioneer. And, you know, the work that we do around Diamond in particular, you know, Australia have copied us and have their own system. The US are looking at how they might be able to do something. Canada's looking at things. Europe, Germany are looking at how they can replicate the work that we're doing, because gathering data and really finding out who you are employing and who's making the work and the content that is being shown around the world is just as important as the content that's being shown around the world. So you know that there are multiple voices and a multiplicity of voices that can be heard and understood and respected and given space.
So congratulations on that, Deborah, because I think that's really critical to get a chain reaction going globally. It's long overdue. However, I would like to get your thoughts on the last couple of years. Things have improved since the Me Too movement, you know, for women, and since the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests. Things have shifted. It's brought an awareness to people. However, have they shifted enough? And can I be so bold and ask, can we see a day where the percentages we have of, you know, in relation to the general to the census, can we exceed those in media? Do you reckon that's a possibility?
So to answer backwards, I think those percentages are always just a baseline, and they're just a guidance, because the population changes. The census is once every 10 years, and obviously within that 10 years demographics change dramatically, and you know, whether that's migration, emigration, immigration, those will have an impact on that, as will on all of them, not just on race or ethnicity, on sexual orientation, on gender as well, and on disability in particular. So I think that they are just guidelines, and you know, so some groups are already exceeding that. For example, LGB is already exceeding what is the national census data baseline, but that's just the baseline, right? So so obviously the idea is that we use that to grow and crash through, it's not meant to be a ceiling. Yeah. To answer the first questions, absolutely, you know, the murder of George Floyd, the consequences of people finally being able to speak truth to power around sexual harassment and abuse in terms of the Me Too movement, have enabled and facilitated a wider and deeper conversation about behaviour and culture within media. But what a lot of people have done is sort of gone the first step, which is, you know, the black box or the Time's Up badge. So what I want to see, and what, you know, the drive that we're working, the way that we work at Creative Diversity Network, is to go deeper and further than that. So it's like, okay, so you put the black box up with the white words, but what does that mean? What does that mean for investment? What does that mean for your recruitment? What does that mean for, you know, so-called banter in across staff networks or within your teams? What does that mean for people in senior roles? You know, our data doesn't just collect on screen and off screen, it collects across genres, across role types, across seniority of role types, We collect a demographic data on 150 plus roles in television and broadcasting, on and off screen. So, who are your main characters in your continuing dramas? Who are your writers? How do you access and how do you offer opportunities to all of these groups? That's what's really, really, really important. And that's what I want to see much more of, as opposed to the surface level of what can feel like reactive. I've done my bit now. I've done something in response to something, and then that's it. I can now walk away. So we're here to make sure that people don't walk away, that they don't just do it once and then think that it's done, that it becomes continual, that it turns into standard operating procedure, and that they change the way, in particular behaviours, because I think a lot of this is not just about data and demographics, but it's also about how people behave and how people treat each other, which I think after the last 2 years of pandemic is also, becoming more and more obvious that is something that needs to be considered in workforce and industry, not just in media, but in all industries. That conversation about how we treat people is really critical.
Well, talking about how we treat people, something I'd like to discuss with you, which for me, from my lived experience working in media and just speaking to my colleagues and doing all these interviews that I've done and just all my research. So we have diversity as let's call it an industrial endeavor, which for me has remained kind of quite distant from structural racism. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm being paranoid, but for me, the conversation around racism hasn't really happened, So what are your thoughts on that?
I go right back to, Scarman, Lord Scarman's report, never mind, the Stephen Lawrence report, the Macpherson report, where indeterminate institutional racism was coined. I go back to the idea that if you do not understand and respect the communities which you serve, which public service is, whether that's, public service broadcasting, policing, education, healthcare, any of those things, if you do not respect and understand the communities which you serve, then you will always be at risk of perpetuating myths about those communities. And racism is real, it's alive and well. We don't have to, I think anyone that says it's not is deluded and is being naive and is playing a different sort of a strange game. It is absolutely prevalent. But one thing that never happened was a lot of creative industries, whether that's broadcasting, advertising, or any others, or marketing and communications, never really had the conversation about institutional racism, never really had the conversation about what that means and how it applies to them as industries and organizations within those industries. And I think a lot of that is playing out now. I think I try to avoid looking backwards, and I try to use whatever's happened in the past to feed going forward, to feed the future. So that's what I try to do in the work that I do and the way that I work, is to try and feed the future with some of the learning from the past. Absolutely. And the question of racism, it's not going to go away. So you can pretend as much as you want that it doesn't exist, but it's not going anywhere. It is with us for a considerable time to come, because most of what we do and the work that the organizations and institutions that we work for and seek to work for and work with are built on ideas of a superior and inferior, whether that's race, ethnic group, educational understanding, physical or mental well-being. They are all built on something that is superior and inferior, and those are core challenges that will always need to be considered.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Everything you've said is just bang on point. And I really hope the conversation around racism gets progressed, because that's something that's been swept under the carpet too long, irrespective of what reports come out, in my opinion. Listen, Deborah, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been absolutely brilliant to hear all the amazing work that you guys are doing, you and your team. Long may you continue, and please keep me up to date with any exciting new changes, and you're welcome to come back and have a chat with me.
Oh, thank you so much, Samina. It's been really great talking to you, and we will. And yeah, we're gonna, everyone out there as well. It's not just us; it's everybody that fills in the form and contributes to the Diamond program in particular. It's really important that for us to say thank you for everybody for engaging and for continually sharing yourselves with us and letting us and trusting us to do right by you.
Well, they are, and you are too. So keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.